Hey, how's it going? Well, today's Tuesday, so it's a little bit late this week. Um, I got an interesting one. I was talking with some people at work, and I was telling them a crazy story about this random thing that happened. And so I decided to tell you guys, but when I put more thought into it, I felt like telling just that story would be unfair. The story, it's a crazy story. I'm gonna end with that. What I want to do is so what I decided after having that conversation and kind of putting some thought into this, I'm going to tell you a bunch of little stories about friends that I've lost, that people that were close to me, not family members, not my grandparents, not my nana, not my aunts who have passed, just the people that I was close with that passed. I'm gonna start at the closest one, which of course were two of the three Minnick sisters. I know some of you in my friends and family list have met Ariana's mother, Kathleen. And Kathleen and I always had this like love. We just had this odd relationship. When I look back at my life and I look at the relationships I've had, and I've had some horrible relationships. I've made some bad decisions, but I've had some really good relationships. And for whatever reason, was forced to walk away, or the other person was forced to walk away. But Kathleen always loved me more than anything, like anybody that I've ever been with. It was different. It was like don't ever leave me because I'll find you type of love, It was, I don't know. It was odd, but it was when she passed, it was unexpected for me because I had not seen her or been around her for, years. And she had just experienced a death in her family, which I'm going to talk about that as well. But I want to give Kathleen I want to tell her story alone. She was going through a rough ordeal, and she came to me and she's like, look, and I know it was very difficult for her because we were going through a gnarly court case. She was very resentful towards me for stuff that had happened that I knew about, and stuff that had happened that I had done, and stuff that had happened that other people had done that I didn't know about. And she had every right to be. I mean, looking back in retrospect, she had every right to be upset at some of the stuff that she had to endure because of the decisions I made. But so she comes to me in the middle of this court case, after having lost her sister and having been super distraught. She's just like, look, oh crap. She's like, I need time with Ariana. I haven't had a lot of time with her in the last few years, and I just lost my sister, and I feel I just need to be around her. And at the time, going through court, I wanted to give Ariana access, and I seen the writing on the wall. I mean, I was going to lose that court case. There's no way around it. I dealt with this enough times, even though I had a super ridiculously high-priced lawyer. I basically Googled the best family lawyer in the state, and I called the first number, and they didn't answer. I called the number 2 guy, and he answered, and it was not just him, but it was like one of the partners answered. And man, I've spent more money on that lawyer than I spent on all the lawyers I ever spent in my entire life, from all the court cases with Sarah and prior to that with Kathleen. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is, we're in the thick of it. Like, we're coming to the end of it when this event occurred, and she comes to me and she tells me this, and so I want to give her access. But at the same time, I'm leery because I already know that this thing is going south, and I know that if I allow her to take Ariana and take her home, that it's gonna not just work against me, but it's going to there's potential for harm there. We haven't seen her in a while, and in the past, prior to this, she had some drink. She had some issues, and so I just wanted to be careful. And so, and the other thing too is she had just beat cancer. Like she had just beat cancer. So I'm like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna give you a key to my house. I already had a lock on my bedroom door, so I didn't have to worry about. I had a separate key for my bedroom door. Like, I'm gonna give you a key to my house, and you can come and go as you please. You can see Ariana whenever you want, but you have to do it at my house. And she was like, cool, no problem. And so she basically was there every day. She'd pick Ariana up from school, bring her home, I'd cook dinner, and she would hang out and she would sleep in Ariana's room. And this went on for, a couple weeks. And I noticed that, when we would go to the grocery store, she couldn't walk around for more than 10 or 15 minutes, and she'd have to sit down. I noticed that she was just always really weak and always really tired, had a tough time doing anything. And she kept telling me something's not right, I don't feel right. And then, one day, we had this mass interruption in everybody's lives all of a sudden out of nowhere. And it was, I don't want to go into detail about that, but, it was, everything was good. Everything was good. And then, I get a phone call, and then all of a sudden everything's not good. And there's turmoil and anger, and her and Ariana have this heavy conversation where she wants Ariana to act a certain way, and Ariana doesn't want anything to do with it, and she's hurt by the whole thing. And she left. So that week, so there was 3 weeks there that she was at my house all the time. And at the end of the second week, going into the third week, we made the decision to get back together and work it out. She, after her whole cancer thing, she was clean and sober, and she was trying to get her her life straight. And so we made this decision, and it was really just talk, about plans for the future. And then that incident occurred, and that night was a little hectic. She was super upset. She was crying. She's in Ariana's room. I don't remember exactly. I just remember that the next morning I happened to see her before I went to work, and she was supposed to go home, go to a doctor's appointment. Her mom had a doctor's appointment, and then they were going to meet up for lunch. And I guess she went home and took a nap and just didn't wake up, and it was brutal. That weekend, Ariana had planned to go to Tucson, and I get the phone call on Friday afternoon, and I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. Ariana had been through so much already. We had already had just so much. Man, it was rough. And so I didn't tell her. I let her go to Tucson, and she went with my older kids, and I think that, if I remember correctly, I told them not to tell her. I wanted her to go get through the weekend. When we got home, we would talk. So yeah, it was brutal. It was rough. The whole thing, that the funeral, and realized that the reason that she popped up in my house to begin with was she had just lost her sister. Jessica Minnick was the youngest sister, and Jessica was the first of the three sisters I had met. She was dating Corey, who was at the time my best friend. She was not just my best friend, but he was like my road dog. I was doing side jobs, and we worked together at work, and then we were doing side jobs together. And then when I left, I took him with me. worked at the next company. We worked at 3 companies together, and every time I left, I took him with me. And we were just super tight. And so he's dating one sister, I'm dating one sister, and Jessica was always around. She went to Vegas and stayed at my folks' house. Her and Corey did. We all were real tight, and Jessica to me was always like super pretty, and Kathleen was pretty, but Jessica was different pretty. She had Kathleen would dress up and put makeup on, and she would make herself look pretty, but Jessica didn't have to do anything. She just was naturally pretty. And so, I'm sure she probably got a lot of attention. I don't know the extenuating circumstances about her death, other than it was tragic. She had 2 children. One of them, her son, was very young. It was very unexpected. And for me, from my perspective, I was shocked. I was shocked. When I heard that, I couldn't believe it. Ariana was so bummed. Ariana was so hurt. Her and Jessica were super tight. So when we got the news, it was so difficult. Kathleen, that was actually what caused Kathleen and I to bury the hatchet and start communicating. Was Jessica passing away. She came to me, she was distraught, she just needed, she needed a crutch, and asked me if I would go with her to the funeral, and I didn't know how the family was going to receive me. The only time I seen the family was in court, and it was ugly. The court cases were bad, but they received me with open arms. I was thankful. I was Ariana's dad, but for a long time we were all real tight. So the parents, were, I think the mom was a little shocked to see, but the dad was like, considering everything that had happened, the dad was surprisingly, I'm not gonna say he was happy to see me, but he was not standoffish at any point, in any way. That kind of segued into this whole thing with me and Kathleen, but the family, and Ariana included, that they lost 2 sisters within 3 weeks of each other. The one thing that did happen, which was not expected, was the 2 girls were able to be buried with their sister. So I thought that was pretty awesome. The middle sister was Melissa, and Melissa and I always had a bond. Melissa was, when I met the family, when Corey first brought me around the family, I had met Kathleen, and she was very forward. She was very vocal about her intent that she wanted to date me. But I had my eyes set on Melissa, and for a long time, for months and months and months, I was fighting Kathleen off to try to wait to meet Melissa. At least, I don't know. I just had this thought that I wanted to just meet her and see how it went before I did this, before I moved forward. And I was real reluctant because of some of the issues that Kathleen had, but before I ended up meeting her, after, like I said, months, 6 or 8 months, maybe even longer, Kathleen and I finally got together, and then we're in a relationship, and then I finally met Melissa. And, for those of you guys that were around during that time, Kathleen and I were on again, off again. So there were a couple times when Melissa and I would hang out. I know I took her to a family function one time. So my brothers and Uriah's neighbors all met her. She was really, the truth of the matter, she was the prettiest of all the sisters, in my opinion. I'm sure Corey would tell you different. I'm sure Ariana would tell you different. But she was not the type of person that had a lot of friends, and I always seemed to just run into her at random places. Um, and I don't know, we always had this tight bond. And at the time when she passed, I was not in contact with the family, and I seen a Facebook post is how I found out, and I was so bummed. I was so bummed. You have this like survivor's guilt when, or at least I did it in that situation, and that again was what caused Catherine and I to get back together. We were broken up when that happened, and she was like, "I need you." She needed a crutch for the funeral, and we ended up getting back together. Same thing with Jessica. Yeah, it was. I don't know. There were times when there were times, I don't know. It was very difficult when you care about somebody and you're not in contact with them, and they just abruptly unexpectedly pass, which unfortunately for most people that's the case. They lose a loved one. Almost everybody that I'm going to talk about in this video, which is already running long, it's very difficult. The person that another person that I lost recently, who really was affecting to me, was Johnny Wright. Eric Wright and I have been the best of friends since we were kids, since I was like a sophomore in high school. I was like 15 years old when Eric and I were hanging out. And I didn't meet Johnny until I left Yellowstone. I got stranded in Oregon and in Portland, and Johnny just welcomed me with open arms. He was super cool, super handsome, looked like Bon Jovi, and dude was just totally chill. He took me in, he fed me like I was family. He only heard about me, had never met me, and I always really loved that about him. As soon as Johnny moved to Arizona, it was like we were instantly close. It was like Scott. Scott is Eric's brother, and I consider those guys and Ruth to be family. My brothers do too. And there was a lot of things I didn't know about, active duty and Lou Gehrig's disease, and to see somebody that, Johnny had a beautiful family, a young family. It was really difficult, and for a majority of the people that I know didn't know Johnny. He was like Army Reserves, and like I said, he's just super handsome. To me, I always thought he looked like Bon Jovi, and I know in the '80s, all the chicks love Bon Jovi. But he like I said, he had a beautiful family, and it was just tragic. Just the definition of tragic. The youngest I remember being and losing somebody, the person that the first time I felt like the death of a friend, somebody that I was close with, was a young girl named Tish Miller. Tish's uncle and my mom were dating, and we all lived together. Tish's mom was my mom's boyfriend's brother, and we all lived together. And so we went to school together. We were the same age, and we were really tight. And actually, we're the same age, but she was a grade ahead of me because I was born in December. I went to school late. But I just remember getting the notification that she had passed. I want to say I was at school when it happened. when I found out about it, it happened during school hours. She was tragically hit by a car very, very young. She's a freshman in high school. I was in the 8th grade. And, she had went to that school the year before. I went to Desert Shadows. She went to Greenway Middle School. And then she went to, I think she was at, I want to say she was probably based on where she lived, either PV or Shadow Mountain. I'm not even sure. But I was in the school she was at the year prior, and like all of her friends that she left behind, I knew all of them, and the guys that she dated were my friends. And so I don't know. It just was, to me, it was just tragic. So to see, the family mourn, and it was just very, very, very difficult for me at that age and being so young. At that point, I had already lost my grandfather, and I think that was it. I only lost my grandfather at that point, who I was super tight with. But yeah, that was the first time I remember like going, feeling with mortality, losing like a friend that wasn't family. And then in junior high school at Desert Shadows, in the 7th grade, there was a new kid in school. We became buddies. We ended up staying buddies for a long time. He was the one that, I think I had wrestled already one year. It was my second year, but he came from a big wrestling family. This kid, Ronald Perkins. My brothers knew him. I'm sure Joey knew him. We were super tight, super tight, like inseparable in elementary school and early junior high school. And he ended up moving away when we got to high school. He was the reason why I wrestled in that high school tournament when I was in junior high school. I went to go support. I went with the family. I had won the junior high school tournament, and then went to the next weekend, or whatever it was, to the high school tournament. And he's like, "No, you gotta compete. And then I ended up winning it, the freshman tournament when I was in the 8th grade. But it was because I always felt that it was because of him that I did so well in wrestling. Because not him specifically, but it's because of his dad. His dad was, he was a little guy, and his dad was kind of a little guy. Or at least, we were closer in size, and so I spent a lot of time wrestling with his dad, and his dad coaching us, and I don't know, it just changed my whole perspective on the sport. Like I went from just, this is like anything else, like chess club, to some random club that I was doing, and to taking it serious, to putting in the extra effort to get better. And it's crazy because I didn't even know that he had passed right away. I remember when it happened, he had a little sister. For the life of me, I can't remember her name. She had a friend named Penny, and I had seen Penny Pointer at a grocery store. I think she was working at a grocery store somewhere. She was somewhere, and I happened to walk past, and I contacted her. She stopped me, and she was like, "Hey, you need to get a hold of the family. There's something going on with Ronnie," but she didn't say what. And I was like, cool, all right. But this is like the 80s, early 90s. It wasn't like it is today. We can just go look somebody up on Facebook. And then, like, sometime later, a year or two later, I found out that he had passed, and the details of it, that, he was murdered. It was, the story that I heard, which I never was able to verify, was tragic. And I know there was a couple times when I traveled to Colorado where the family lived at, and I attempted to reach out to the family. I looked in the phone book, and there was one Ronald Perkins. It was the wrong Ronald Perkins, but apparently he had received calls from them before, so he was going to try to get in contact with them for me when I explained to him who I was and what was going on. But I never was able to find them. But yeah, that was another incident that was just very, very difficult to deal with. It was, I was just sophomore year for me, so it would have been junior year for him. I'm not even sure when it happened. I want to say it happened my freshman year, so it's like a whole year later. But yeah, that was very, very difficult for me at that time, especially because the other people knew him that I knew, who I wasn't friends with, and knew that I was tight with him, and it just so happens that somebody had a family member that lived in that town, if I remember correctly, and they told him, and I don't know, I don't know, it doesn't really matter, but the point is, it was just very difficult to lose somebody that you were so tight with for so long. Okay, so now the last story. This whole incident was, this whole thing with this last story was this like miracle, crazy thing happened. So let me explain who I'm talking about. So my cousin Star grew up with Joey in LA, and they were super tight. So we went to LA and we would see him, when we moved to San Diego, I would spend time in LA, and in the summertime, and we would hang out, and then Joey would come and spend time at our house, and Star would come too, and we all got really close. And the plan always was after school that we were gonna all go back to Arizona, all three of us. And that time after high school, coming back to Arizona, those of you guys that were around know that it was a time for us. It was a lot of stuff going on. It's only by the grace of God that one or all of us didn't end up in prison for the stuff that we were doing and the things that happened during that time. But I can tell you that whole thing would have been way different had Star been there. He was, it would have been an entirely, be telling you a whole different story. There's probably a lot of people who are lucky that Star wasn't there. But, so Joey and Star had a falling out, and Joey ended up coming by himself, and, one day, I just came back from San Diego, so I had lost contact with a lot of my really close friends, and one of them was Eric Wright. And Joey and I had ran into a mutual friend, and he's like, we're like, hey, how can we get a hold of Eric? And he's like, Eric, he lives in these apartments somewhere around Metro. I don't know the name of the apartments, but the name of the apartment sounds like Smoke Weed. And the apartment is like, I want to say he said N9, which is weird because it's not a usual apartment number, but okay. So that's all we had to go on. He lived somewhere around Metro in an apartment, and his apartment number they thought maybe was N9. Something like that, whatever they told us. So one night, Joey and I make the decision, we're gonna go find Eric Wright. So we end up getting dropped off at or around Metro. I don't even remember how we got there, but we were on foot, and we start wandering around the outside of Metro, those apartments, all the way around Metro, and we find Smokewood Apartments. So, okay, this could be it. So we start wandering through Smokewood Apartments, and it just so happens that apartment number that maybe is it, they have an apartment number like that there. So we go up to the door, and we're like standing out there, and we're like, should we knock? And so we knock on the door, not knowing if he lived there or not, and Eric answers the door, and we're like, no way. And so we end up partying all night. We go in the morning, and we walk down to Encanto Park, or some park there, that had a lake, a lake, had fish in it. So we went there at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We fished like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. We go back to Eric's house and we pass out. A couple hours later, my dad shows up at the door, and we didn't know where we were going to be. We didn't know how long we were going to be there for, and we didn't know if we were even going to find it. And it was just the weirdest, oddest thing. Like, we're asleep, and all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and like, hey, your dad's here. And I'm like, no, not my dad. Like, yeah, your dad. I'm like, my dad doesn't know where I'm at right now. Like, dude, your dad is here. What the heck? So we get up, and he's like, yeah, get your stuff, let's go. And so both of us, me and Joey, get your stuff, we gotta go right now. So we have no idea what's going on. As far as we knew, we were in trouble. Whatever was going on, we were in big trouble. So he puts us in the car, he drives us to my uncle's house, and the whole time, like, what's going on? He's like, he wouldn't tell us. He wouldn't tell us what was going on. So we get to my uncle's house, and Joey's mom's there, and we're like, oh crap, we're in big trouble. I don't know what we did, or when we did it, or how they found out, but whatever we did, we're in big trouble. And so we get there, my dad parks, and he tells Joey, go inside, I want to talk to Rich. So I'm just like, all right, here it comes, and Joey goes inside, and then my dad tells me that Star had passed, that he died, and that Joey was going to be tough. It was going to be tough, and I needed to be there for him. And he gave me some cash, and he's like, just go be with him, and we need you right now, whatever. And so the crazy thing about it for me was I walk inside the house, and they didn't know how to get the words out. Everybody's bawling. Joey's bawling. And so I ended up having to tell him, because nobody could get the words out. And it was just brutal. Yeah, it was such an odd thing for my dad to show up there. For years and years, we had no idea how he knew where we were at. It was a miracle from my perspective how he found us, because it just didn't even make sense. But it turns out there was an AM/PM right by Eric's apartments, like at Peoria 35th or something like that. And my dad was the manager of that store. He spent a lot of time there. And the guy who lived across the hall from Eric's apartment used to go there and used to talk to my dad all the time. And it must have came up in conversation. Apparently, when my dad, I think that's how he got there. I think my dad dropped us off there. And I think my dad called that guy and was like, hey, I'm trying to find this guy. He's a friend of my son. He lives over there. And that guy's went, oh yeah, I know Eric, right? He lives right here. And told him where to find Eric's apartment. I think that's what happened. But from our perspective at the time, it was just, for years and years, we were just baffled how he found us. But I'm pretty sure that's what actually happened. Yeah, that was so brutal, because, Star was, he was different than me and Joey. Like here's Star on one end of the spectrum, here's me on the other end of the spectrum, and there's Joey like right in the middle, is the way I always looked at it. And even though Star and I always clicked real well, we always clicked super well, looking back at all the craziness that ensued throughout our teenage years and running around, Phoenix and all the crap, had he been there, it would have been different. I think it would have been a lot different. Of course, we all may have ended up in prison had he been there. I don't know. It's tough to say, but it would have been a time, that's for sure. I don't know. I hope you enjoyed my stories. I don't know how I'm going to make this fit into one episode. I got to look and see how much the other videos are. But, I know it's well over 30 minutes. So I'm driving home from work right now. It's 4:15. I left work at 3:30. So 40. It might be 30 minutes. It might be good. Anyways, so hug your friends and family, hug your loved ones, tell people you love them, and stay safe, stay prayed up.